find it through the literature. In Latin America, there were craft built by escaped German scientists after the war that were belching this smoke. Basically, probably they had some malfunctioning spark plug, and some of the combustion chambers were not running properly. That's why they were belching the smoke. They called them the smoke-puffing UFOs. This was in 1952 in Peru. The Germans were already flying, hopping around from their secret bases in UFOs. Then, one day I read a debunking story in the tabloid paper about German astronauts. Let's make it abundantly clear. A tabloid paper, by definition, does not debunk anything. On the contrary, the crazier the better, the more papers they would sell. So I got very suspicious. Why the hell would these guys debunk a story that the German astronauts were shot in orbit in the 40s and came back in the 80s? And I got very suspicious. And then I went back through my files. This is the first time the idea of German spaceflight dawned on me, through that tabloid article in the Weekly World News. I went through my file and I discovered that a lot of the craft, a lot of the saucers had exo-atmospheric capabilities that they have in their possession. This is a rocket engine propelled craft with outboard rocket engines, no propellers, no nothing, carrying the oxidizer on board. Unlike the turbojet engine that is atmospheric dependent, and if you go out of the atmosphere, the engine would flame out and you would have to wait in a long suborbital flight to land back on the planet and to restart the engine. This craft is carrying its oxidizer on board and has a clear exo-atmospheric and orbital capability. In a similar way, some of the Kugelblitzes were carrying their oxidizer on board. This is a manned version of the Kugelblitz, which had a spinning gyro inside. It may have been enough to create the lift for that craft. This is the June 14, 1955 volume of Look magazine, talking about the turbojet craft. Another very interesting design was produced by Victor Schauberger, but in this case he did not apply any moving parts in any engines. He was spinning fluids, either compressed air from a hose or water from his garden hose, through his through the insides of these. These were made of copper sheet metal, 3 feet diameter. He made them in the Kertel works in Vienna, Neustadt. In order to increase the mass of the spinning fluid, he was mixing fine marble dust with the compressed air, so as to increase the mass of the part of the thing that was spinning. These things were so successful, one of them crashed through the roof of his laboratory and escaped. And they were free energy designs, because once you spin the water inside, it was water, some of them were running on water in closed loop. It would continue spinning on its own, it would create the lift so powerful that the craft would raise vertically and disappear, surrounded in a bluish halo. The fact that the Germans had free energy saucers were even more viciously debunked and covered up than the fact that they had saucers. Because, well, saucers, we can swallow that somehow, but free energy saucers, that's the end of our energy empire on the planet as we know it. This is it. The Weekly World News, the mouthpiece of the CIA, opened my eyes for the German space program. I said, I mean, you cannot have a debunking article in a tabloid paper. I mean, it's ridiculous. By default, they support everything. The crazier the better. So then I realized maybe this is something that most of the things I do believe in, they are true that they write, but occasionally. This was the first item that they debunked in about 3 years' time. The other one was a story by a Canadian author called Other Losses, about 3 million German soldiers, Wehrmacht soldiers, that were put in concentration camps by Eisenhower. All food was refused to them, and in 3 years, 1 million died out of these 3 million. They even returned humanitarian aid trains with foodstuffs from probably German-speaking Switzerland. Were returned on orders by Eisenhower, and 1 million Germans died in the concentration camp. And this story has been viciously debunked in the press, including the tabloids. So, German space program, the twin-stage America rocket, a V2 rocket on top of a giant single engine, first stage, was able to reach the East Coast. 4 of these were fired, probably with manned wing version of the V2 on top. This is a drawing of the craft. This is a pilot's cabin. This is the first version of the wings. Then they had a second delta wing, more streamlined version. And they would reach an altitude of 360 kilometers, 3.5 times as high as the Vostok and Gemini and other orbital flights. So, I mean, they would win astronauts' wings were they to fly after the war in the United States. And here is a very rare, the only photograph I know about of the German spacesuit. This is the head, the face facing forward, and the hand with quite a sophisticated glove with a hermetic seal on the controls. And this is the other hand with a seal, with the other glove, on the controls of the Horten flying wing. The helmet is fully transparent, although it is riveted together by several pieces of plexiglass, perspex. Still, it has a lot better vision field than the first primitive Russian Vostok spacesuits, which were only pressurized helmet. The rest of the body was tightened in rubber strings to imitate the atmospheric pressure on your body. This is a full pressure suit because of the airtight seal on the glove and the special joints that we find on the knee here, the special knee joints. Another photograph, we see the pilot. It's a very clear vision around him in the Horten flying wing turbojet stealth bomber. That's 1945, just a few months before the war ended, during some of the first flights of the airplane. It's a full pressure spacesuit that was probably used in their exoatmospheric and orbital flights with their rocket-powered craft. Carrying the oxidizer on board, they can go in orbit in literally a few seconds. And this is the most important photograph because we see the air holes going not into the helmet as on the Russian spacesuits of the Vostok type or the Gemini, the initial primitive spacesuits, where only the helmet is pressurized. But it goes into the body, so the whole body is under normal pressure. It's a lot more difficult to build such a suit.
So you're saying those Horten flying wings are going to go out of the atmosphere, out into space?
Not they, but they used the same suit for the Hortens because they did not have time to build a pressurized cabin. But they were definitely going at quite a high altitude. So, on top of the rocket-powered craft, we found the drawing of a much bigger streamer disc that was 60 yards in diameter, almost 180 feet in diameter, 30 yards tall, which is 10 stories tall, sitting on 5-story tall legs. And the most astonishing thing was that when I was going down, I was trying to confirm the size of the craft that they give here. 60-yard diameter. This is a football field-sized dreadnought, powered by basically chemical mixture, fuel and oxidizer, carried in reservoirs around the periphery of the craft, losing their weight, that would drive high-speed turbines that will produce a high frequency